Alright, in this video I'm going to do a review of Ethernet routing on a PCB that was designed by a student. And as we go through this, feel free to add your own thoughts in the comments if you think I missed something important. Before we get into any technical details, I just want to say this right away. Great job to the student who designed this board. When I was a student, I barely knew what a PCB even was. So just getting to the point where you are routing Ethernet signals is already a big achievement. I want everyone to use this review as a learning opportunity. Now let's go through the routing step by step and talk about what works, what could be better, and why. Alright, let's jump straight into it. I want to start with the power and decoupling of this Ethernet PHY, because decoupling is one of the most important things to get right in any high-speed design. If we look at the schematic, we can see that you have decoupling capacitors placed on the VDD pins. In simple terms, these capacitors are there to provide stable power locally and to filter out high-frequency noise. In reality, they also help reduce the loop inductance of the power distribution network and prevent things like rail collapse. But that gets pretty technical and advanced, so I am not going to go too deep into that here. From a practical layout point of view, the main idea is this: decoupling capacitors should be placed as close as possible to the VDD pins. Ideally, you want at least one capacitor per power pin. When it comes to routing, use wide traces or even short plane connections if possible. The goal is to keep the current paths short and low impedance, so the capacitors can actually do their job. If we look at the student's PCB, we can see that the placement of most of the decoupling capacitors is actually not that bad. They are placed fairly close to the VDD pins, which is good. The main exceptions here are C39 and C40, which could be placed closer to the power pins than they currently are. One thing that could also be improved in this area is the routing itself. Using thicker traces or wider connections would help, and in some cases it would be even better to use power planes instead of narrow traces. Now, if we compare this to my redesign of this part of the board, you can see that I've chosen to use power planes for these connections. Another useful rule of thumb when it comes to decoupling is the placement of ground vias. Near the ground pad of each decoupling capacitor, it is a good idea to place at least 2 ground vias. This helps reduce the loop inductance of the current path and improves how effective the decoupling actually is. Overall, the original placement is a solid starting point, and with a few small changes, it could be even better. Another important part of the circuit is the crystal oscillator. It is very important to keep the crystal fairly close to the IC and to route the 2 crystal signals as symmetrically as possible. This helps keep the oscillation stable and reduces sensitivity to noise. If we look at how the student has done it, the crystal is placed a bit too far away from the IC. On top of that, one of the crystal traces is routed underneath the footprint of a decoupling capacitor, which is something I would not recommend. These crystal signals are quite sensitive. If there is switching noise on the VDD pin connected to that decoupling capacitor, some of that noise can couple into the crystal trace and disturb the clock signal. Now, if we look at my redesign, I have moved the decoupling capacitors up here instead. Of course, that required moving some other components out of the way. After doing that, I was able to place the crystal much closer to the IC and route the 2 signals in a more symmetrical way. This reduces noise coupling and helps the oscillator behave more predictably. This is a small placement change, but it can make a big difference for stability. Moving on to one of the most important sets of signals on this board, the ones coming from the RJ45 connector into the Ethernet IC. These are the TX differential pair and the RX differential pair. If we look at the schematic, we can see that these signals are differential, which means they should be routed as differential pairs on the PCB. In the schematic, I've added net labels so that each pair shares the same base name with a plus on one signal and a minus on the other. This tells KiCad that these 2 signals belong together as a differential pair. The same approach is used for the RX pair as well. We can also see the 49.9 ohm resistors on each signal. These are the termination resistors. Their job is to properly terminate the signals and help prevent reflections on the transmission line. In the schematic, the differential pairs are drawn with short stubs going off to these resistors on each signal. And that is perfectly fine in the schematic, but it is very important not to implement those stubs in the actual PCB layout. On the PCB, we want to route the differential pair as continuously as possible. That means no unnecessary branches, no stubs, and no sudden changes in geometry. The goal is to keep the impedance consistent from the IC all the way to the connector. Getting this part right is critical for reliable Ethernet communication. If we look at the student's PCB, we can see that these signals are not routed as differential pairs. We can also see that they are not impedance controlled. For Ethernet differential signals, we are aiming for 100 ohms differential impedance. If the impedance of the traces is not controlled, reflections will occur along the signal path. Too many reflections can seriously affect insertion loss. In simple terms, that means the signal gets weaker and more distorted as it travels, and at some point it can break communication entirely. Impedance control is achieved by adjusting the trace width and the gap between the two traces in the differential pair. Both of these parameters directly affect the differential impedance. The dielectric thickness of the PCB stack-up also plays a role. The distance between the signal layer and the reference plane has a big impact on impedance, so it always needs to be considered. To calculate the correct values, you do not need to guess. You can use an online differential impedance calculator. Just search for a differential impedance calculator, enter your stack-up parameters, and it will give you a good starting point. This step is absolutely critical for Ethernet routing and should not be skipped. Now, if we look at my design, the way I have done this is by first calculating the differential impedance using an online calculator. From that calculator, I got the trace width and the gap between the two traces. Those values were then defined in the design rules inside KiCad. As you can see, the differential signals are routed as continuously as possible. There are no stubs and no branches in the routing. I achieved this by moving and placing the termination resistors in such a way that the signals flow straight through the resistors instead of branching off to them. In order to get the correct orientation toward the Ethernet connector, I had to go down to the bottom layer. When doing this, I used vias that are placed as tightly coupled as possible so the differential pair stays together through the layer transition. For differential signals, another important thing to keep in mind is the timing delay of each signal in the pair. That is why you see the small tuning section on one of the traces, which is also called skew tuning. In simple terms, this means that the timing needs to be the same for the plus signal and the minus signal. And in even simpler terms, it means that the trace length of both signals needs to be exactly the same. If we do not do this, then in very high-speed designs it can cause something called mode conversion. That means part of the differential signal can convert into a common signal. This is very advanced signal integrity behavior and is honestly overkill for this particular design, but it is still good practice to be aware of it and handle it correctly when routing differential pairs. Now keep in mind that this design is a 4-layer board and it does have a clean return plane on layer 2, which is very good. So nice job to the student there. Other than that, I mainly moved a couple of components around and cleaned up some of the routing. There are also some general PCB design techniques that are good to think about and that should really be used throughout the entire board. One of those is adding ground vias whenever a signal transitions through a via. Doing this helps contain the return currents and the electric fields when a signal changes layers. It also helps minimize high Q cavity resonances, which could otherwise affect the insertion loss at specific resonance frequencies. On top of that, it helps reduce via to via crosstalk. Another tip is related to pull-up resistors. Pull-up resistors are usually not very critical when it comes to placement, so they do not need to be placed close to the IC. You can usually place them wherever it fits best on the board. That said, you still want to avoid unnecessary trace branching, so it is a good idea to keep the pull-up resistor directly in the path of the signal instead of creating a stub. Overall, the design looks good. Good job to the student. I am very happy to see more students getting interested in PCB design. It is a skill that is highly sought after and in very high demand, especially with all the technological advancements happening right now. Thank you for watching this review. If you feel like I have missed something, please let me know in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video soon.